In now is Senior Supreme Court Lawyer Sanjay Hegde. He is also the counsel for the CPIM at the Apex Court in the demonetisation case. Thank you, Mr. Hegde, for joining in. To begin with, what according to you is a rationale for an ordinance? And the question that many people are baffled with is why now? Why not do this closer to November 8th, November 20th? Why now when the deadline is around the corner?
Well, now that the deadline is around the corner, I assume that most of the money has already come in. Therefore, any further panic in that sense or may be avoided. That may be the government thinking. But essentially, if I was the government, I would probably use the ordinance power to now give life, further life to the notifications. Because there has been a point taken in the Supreme Court that you cannot demonetize by executive order alone, but you need the force of legislation. An ordinance is legislation. I suppose that the government is trying to plug its holes in the procedure which they have adopted so far. And as the previous speaker was saying, it may be that they may want to penalize certain things after the ordinance comes into play. So they could make possibly a law against storing certain kinds of currency after post facto after the ordinance date.
Mr. Hegde, are you referring to a penalty?
Yes, no, not only a penalty. But if they even wanted to threaten imprisonment, for instance, you cannot.
So what would be the most logical penalty or punishment that could be given in such a case? And could that be the reason for going through with an ordinance? We don't know for sure. But would that make sense? What would be the most rational?
Right now we are speculating as to why the government wants to come up with an ordinance. It may just be that they might want to make certain kinds of actions criminal. If you want to criminalize any particular action, then you need a law for that purpose. And because Parliament is not in session, they're stepping in, they're going in through the ordinance route. Not that Parliament being in session makes too much of a difference, because the Parliament doesn't seem to get down to its primary task of legislation most of the time.
Sir, does this ordinance, if it comes through, as and when it comes through, will it have any bearing on the proceedings that are underway in the court? And of course, you're representing some of the petitioners in the demonetization case.
It will. The court would obviously have to take into account any legislation that has come in after the cases were filed. Some of the grounds may not be available to the petitioners to take, because the petitioners have urged that you do not have the powers under the RBI Act to do certain things, and if you need to do those things, you need to amend the Act. Fine, if the ordinance can take care of objections like that.
Sir, of course, I mean, I don't want to sort of start a conversation about anything on, I mean, this matter is sub judice, so taking important precautions there. But some of the conversations that we have had, I mean, there is a view that appeared that under Section 26(2) of the RBI Act, letting currency cease to have legal tender, that is something that is allowed under this particular section. But what you can't do is extinguish currency and absolve RBI and the government of any legal liability unless you amend the law. Is that a view that you'd agree with?
That is a possible view. And the government may be trying to cover as many bases as possible by resorting to legislation finally, and covering up against any possible arguments on that score. But at the end of the day, if you are going to expropriate property, render currency which was hitherto legal tender not legal tender, you may even run up against the constitutional right to property in Article 300A of the Constitution. So these are legal issues which I would not like to speculate further without actually having seen the text of the